Welcome to Mark Noir.
Like, subscribe, and stay on Noir Street.
Tell me, which part of the world are you watching from?
Chapter 1. The Unmarked Delivery. The envelope arrived on a wet Tuesday morning at 11 minutes past 9, which was an inconvenient hour for anything mysterious. Wolfe was upstairs in the plant rooms. Fritz was preparing a sauce that required silence, and I was at my desk trying to convince 3 unpaid bills that they had reached the wrong Archie Goodwin. The bell rang twice. Not 2 ordinary pushes, but 1 short ring followed by a longer one, as if the caller wished to announce that he had character. I opened the front door. The man on the stoop was thin enough to have been mailed in a narrow box. Rain shone on the shoulders of his grey coat, and a grey cap sat low over his forehead. He held a square cream-coloured envelope between 2 gloved fingers. "Nero Wolfe?" he asked. "You have found his house. Finding him is harder," he extended. The envelope. There was nothing written on it. No name, no street, no stamp, no delivery mark. The flap was closed with dark red wax bearing the impression of an old-fashioned key. Who sent it? I only deliver. That makes 2 of us. I deliver questions. Who gave it to you? He looked past my shoulder into the hall. His eyes paused on the table, the hat rack, and the door to the office. They were pale eyes, but not weak ones. Mr. Wolfe will understand. Mr. Wolfe understands many things, including the value of a receipt. There is no receipt. Then I can refuse it. You could. He placed the envelope on the stone ledge beside the door, turned, and descended the steps. I called after him, but he kept walking. By the time I reached the sidewalk, he had crossed 35th Street and slipped behind a delivery truck moving east. I had no hat. The rain was cold, and chasing strangers through traffic before breakfast was not included in my contract. When I returned, Fritz stood in the hall holding the envelope. "He asked for Mr. Wolfe," Fritz said, clearly and without affection. Fritz studied the red seal. "He came yesterday." That stopped me. "The same man?" "I believe so." He stood across the street near the corner for perhaps 10 minutes. When I went to the market, he asked whether this was the residence of Nero Wolfe. I said it was. He thanked me and walked away. "You neglected to report that." He did not seem dangerous. Neither does a mushroom until Wolfe identifies it. Fritz gave me the look he reserves for remarks he considers beneath the dignity of the kitchen. He handed me the envelope and returned to his sauce. I carried it into the office and placed it on Wolfe's desk blotter. His chair behind the desk was empty, which made it look like a throne awaiting a delayed ruler. Rain tapped against the windows. A taxi hissed through the water outside, and somewhere near 9th Avenue a truck horn expressed an opinion about civilization. At 11 o'clock, Wolfe came down from the plant rooms. He entered with the measured dignity of a man who considered haste a personal insult. His brown suit had been made for territory rather than shape, and a small yellow orchid was fixed in his lapel. Theodore Horstman had probably chosen it. Wolfe would not have interrupted his morning schedule merely because an unknown man had delivered a blank envelope. He might have interrupted it for fire, though only after asking whether the flames had reached the orchids. He lowered himself into his chair, adjusted it by an inch, and looked at me. "You are restless." I have been entrusted with a secret so secret that nobody bothered to write it down. His eyes moved to the envelope. I gave him the details, including Fritz's encounter the previous day and the messenger's interest in the hall. Wolfe picked up the envelope, but did not break the seal. He weighed it in his hand, turned it over, and held it close to his nose. "Well?" I asked. "The wax contains beeswax, shellac, and a small quantity of lampblack. It was softened over a flame rather than melted in a spoon. That narrows New York to 4 million suspects. The paper is handmade. The edges were cut with a blade, not produced by a machine. There is a faint odor of cedar. I noticed. Rain." "You noticed weather. That is not the same thing." He tilted the envelope toward the light. The sender chose thick paper to conceal the contents from casual inspection. Yet the envelope bears no address. Therefore, it was never intended to pass through ordinary hands, except mine. Your hands are rarely ordinary. I accepted the compliment cautiously. He took a letter opener from the drawer, but instead of cutting the flap, he inserted the point beneath the wax seal and lifted it intact. Inside was a single sheet of cream paper folded once. Wolfe opened it. Was blank. I leaned over the desk. That should save time. He held the sheet by one corner and examined both sides. Then he passed it to me. There was no writing, no watermark that I could see, and no stain except a tiny grey speck near the lower edge. Maybe the sender ran out of things to say. Pfui. Wolfe reached for the reading glass in his drawer. He inspected the grey speck, then the fold, then the corners. His lips pushed forward and retreated. Archie, lower the blinds. I did. Turn on the desk lamp. I did that too. He held the paper above the lamp, not close enough to scorch it, and slowly moved it from side to side. Nothing appeared. Invisible ink? I asked. An obvious device, and therefore unlikely. He set the paper flat and pressed, a fingertip against its center. Bring me the small bottle of iodine from the cabinet. That was more encouraging. I fetched it. Wolfe poured a little into a shallow glass dish, covered the dish with the blank sheet, and waited. After half a minute, pale brown lines began to emerge across the paper. They were not words. They formed a rectangle divided into smaller shapes, with a dark square in one corner and a circle near the middle. It looked like the rough plan of a room. I bent closer. A floor plan? Perhaps. At the bottom, another mark appeared. It was the same key stamped in the sealing wax, but beside it were 3 short vertical lines. Wolfe removed the paper before the image darkened further. There is still no message, I said. There is a message. You are demanding sentences. What does it say? That depends upon what the shapes represent. He leaned back and closed his eyes. That did not mean he was asleep. It meant the machinery had been switched on and visitors were not welcome. The phone rang. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office, Archie Goodwin speaking. A woman said, "Has the envelope arrived?" Her voice was low and steady, but the steadiness had been applied by effort. What envelope? The one with the red seal. I looked at Wolfe. His eyes remained closed, but one finger moved on the arm of his chair. It arrived, I said. It forgot to introduce itself. You opened it? That is generally what happens to envelopes here. A breath came across the wire. Then Mr. Wolfe has seen the plan. He has seen something. Who are you? I cannot give my name. That puts you in a crowded field. The messenger did not give his either. The messenger is not important. He may be wounded by that. Listen carefully, Mr. Goodwin. At 2 o'clock today, a man will come to see Mr. Wolfe. He will call himself Martin Cole. That is not his name. Do not allow him to take the paper. Why would we? Because he will offer money. That has been known to influence business decisions. If he obtains it, someone will die. Her control cracked on the last word. It was slight, but I heard it. Who? The line went silent. I waited. Who will die? She answered in a whisper. The person who sent it. Then she hung up. I replaced the receiver and reported. Wolfe opened his eyes. You traced the call? He asked. I was too busy being charming. Your priorities are tiresome. I can ask the telephone company. Do so, I called. Used the proper mixture of confidence and invention and learned only that the call had entered through a public exchange. It could have come from any of several booths between 6th and 10th Avenues. Wolfe examined the paper again. A message. Without an address, he said. Maybe more precisely directed than one with it. You said that before lunch was in sight. It has not improved. The absence of an address forced the messenger to identify the destination by knowledge. Someone wished us to know that the delivery was deliberate. More important, someone else wished to intercept it. The man calling himself Martin Cole. Possibly, and the woman, possibly the sender, possibly an accomplice, possibly bait. He placed the sheet inside a fresh envelope and locked it in the middle. Drawer of his desk. You are expecting Mr. Cole at 2? I am expecting someone who wants us to believe he is Mr. Cole. At 1:15, Fritz announced lunch. Wolfe ate grilled shad, small potatoes with parsley, and a salad of watercress and apple. I ate the same things at greater speed and with less thought. Wolfe did not mention the envelope during the meal. He discussed the failure of modern growers to respect the natural habits of orchids and accused a seed company in Connecticut of fraud. At 1:55, we returned to the office. At exactly 2, the bell rang once. I opened the door. The visitor was tall, broad-shouldered, and around 45. His dark coat was wet, though the rain had almost stopped. He removed his hat and gave me a pleasant smile that did not reach his eyes. Mr. Archie Goodwin? That depends on what you're selling. My name is Martin Cole. I have an appointment with Mr. Wolfe. You do now. I took his coat and hat and escorted him into the office. Wolfe regarded him from behind the desk. Cole sat in the red leather chair. I believe an envelope was delivered here this morning, he said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. What color? Cole hesitated for less than a second. Cream. The seal? Red wax. The impression? A key. Wolfe turned his head toward me. He is well informed. Cole smiled. The envelope belongs to my employer. It was delivered here by mistake. Indeed? Yes. I am authorized to recover it and compensate you for the inconvenience. Took a folded check from his pocket and placed it on the desk. It was made payable to Nero Wolfe for $5,000. I looked at the signature. It was a fast black scrawl, but the printed name beneath it was clear. Elias Mercer. That name was familiar. Elias Mercer owned 3 buildings near Gramercy Park, 2 shipping firms, and enough newspaper space to make strangers dislike him. 6. Months earlier, he had been photographed leaving a hearing concerning the disappearance of pension funds from one of his companies. No charge had been filed. Wolfe did not touch the check. You said the envelope belongs to your employer, he said. Did Mr. Mercer send it? Cole's pleasant expression weakened. I did not say Mr. Mercer was my employer. His name appears on the check. I act for several parties. Then the check is either unauthorized or misleading. Cole leaned forward. Mr. Wolfe, there is nothing criminal in this matter. The paper is private property. $5,000 is generous payment for returning something that has no value to you. A woman telephoned to say that if you obtained it, someone would die. Cole's face changed. Only for an instant, but it changed. The muscles tightened around his mouth. What woman? You tell me. I know nothing about a woman. That is inadequate. Archie, return Mr. Cole's hat. Cole stood. You are making a serious mistake. Wolfe's shoulders moved half an inch. I make many mistakes. I dislike being threatened before I have chosen one. Cole stared at him, then at me. Keep the check. Consider it a retainer. I will return at 6. You will return only if invited. Cole went out with me behind him. At the front door, he put on his coat but held his hat in one hand. You work for him, he said. Sometimes. Then persuade him. That paper is not evidence of anything. It is merely dangerous. To whom? He looked toward the office door. To anyone who understands it. He stepped outside. I watched him walk west. A dark sedan waited near the corner. He entered the rear seat, and the car moved away. When I returned to the office, Wolfe had finally picked up the check. He held it near the lamp. What did he say? Wolfe asked. I told him. Wolfe turned the check over. On the back, almost hidden, beneath the endorsement lines, someone had written a number in pencil. That was not there by accident, I said. Very little about Mr. Cole was accidental. He opened the locked drawer, removed the blank paper, and placed it beside the check. The plan revealed by iodine contained 3 short vertical marks beside the figure of the key, 3 lines. The number 14, or perhaps 3, 1, 4. Wolfe rang for beer. You have an idea, I said. I have several. They are quarreling. The phone rang again before Fritz arrived. I answered. This time it was a man. His voice was rough and hurried. Goodwin? Speaking. You have the key plan. That phrase could mean several things. Do not. Let Cole leave the city. He left this house 3 minutes ago. A sharp sound came through the receiver, like a hand striking wood. Then you may already be too late. Who is this? The man ignored me. Go to Mercer House, 3rd floor, room 14. Take the paper. Do not bring the police. The line went dead. I turned to Wolfe. He was looking at the diagram, the check, and the red wax seal. Fritz entered, with a bottle of beer and a glass, but Wolfe did not glance at him. 314, I said. 3rd floor, room 14. Wolfe poured the beer slowly, watching the foam rise. Archie, get your coat. That was enough to make me stare. Nero Wolfe did not leave the brownstone for a vague telephone warning, a $5,000 check, or the possible death of a stranger. He disliked automobiles, distrusted sidewalks, and regarded New York weather as a conspiracy against human comfort. You are coming? He lifted the glass and drank. Certainly not. You are going to Mercer House. You will observe the room. Speak to no policeman unless necessity compels you, and telephone me before touching anything. Anything alive or anything dead? His eyes met mine. That, Wolfe said, is what you are going to discover. Here is Chapter 2, continuing directly from the clues, telephone calls, and Mercer House lead established in Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The empty letter found Mercer House without needing a compass, a bloodhound, or a committee. It stood on East 21st Street, a square brown building with black iron balconies and a stone entrance that looked as if it had been designed to discourage both sunlight and creditors. The brass plate beside the door said Mercer House in letters that had recently been polished, though nothing else had. A uniformed doorman occupied a narrow booth inside the entrance. He was short, round, and equipped with the expression of a man who had been told that every visitor was trouble, but some tipped better than others. I am looking for room 14, I said. There is no room 14. That simplifies. The search, he frowned. Apartments have letters. 3rd floor has 3A through 3F. Then perhaps 14 is a room that does not advertise. His eyes moved over me. I had worn my dark blue suit, which was respectable enough to enter most buildings and dishonest enough to enter the rest. Who sent you? Martin Cole. That name worked. The doorman's face did not exactly change, but it made an attempt. Mr. Cole does not live here. I did not say he did. He has an office downtown. I did not say he slept here either. The doorman looked toward the elevator. You cannot go upstairs without a tenant's permission. Which tenant should I ask? I would not know. You are guarding a building while knowing nothing about the people inside. That is an advanced profession. He stood. You had better leave. I might have tried charm, money, or a sudden interest in municipal fire regulations, but the telephone booth near the rear wall offered a better investment. I stepped into it, closed the folding door, and called Wolfe. He answered after the second. Ring. There is no room 14, I told him. The 3rd floor apartments use letters. The doorman knows Cole and wishes he did not. Describe the entrance. I did, including the elevator, the staircase, the booth, and a row of brass. Mailboxes, the mailboxes, Wolfe said. How are they arranged? 4 across and 5 down. Numbered? Apartment letters and tenant names? Read the 3rd row. I opened the booth door and leaned far enough to see them. 3A, Helen Frost. 3B, Daniel Keyes. 3C has no card. 3D, Mercer Storage Office. 3D is not a residence. Apparently not. Ascertain whether the building originally used numbered rooms. That may require persuading my round friend. Then persuade him. He hung up. The doorman was still standing and still disapproving. I approached his booth. How long? Have you worked here? 11 years. Long enough to remember when the apartments were numbered. His eyes sharpened. They were never numbered. That was too quick. What do you mean? You answered, before deciding whether it was any of my business. That means the answer matters. His jaw moved. Leave the building. I took out my wallet, not to bribe him, but to show my private investigator's license. Some men are impressed by credentials. Others become angry because they recognize trouble in official print. My name is Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. A man telephoned our office and directed me to the 3rd floor, room 14. Another man offered Wolfe $5,000 for a paper connected with this building. If that sounds ordinary to you, I will go home and apologize. He stared at the license, then at me. There has not been a room 14 for 20 years, he said. That is an improvement. The building used to be a private club. Rooms were numbered then. After Mr. Mercer bought it, the upper floors were converted into apartments. Which apartment contains the old room 14? He sat down slowly. 3C, the one without a name on the mailbox. It is empty. Let us see how empty. He shook his head. Mr. Mercer keeps it locked. Does Mr. Mercer come here? Sometimes. Does Cole? The doorman's lips tightened. Sometimes. That was when the elevator indicator above us moved from 3 to 2. The doorman looked at it. So did I. The elevator descended and stopped at the ground floor. The door slid open. Nobody was inside. A small dark stain marked the carpet near the rear corner. I stepped closer. Stay where you are, the doorman said. The stain was wet and red. It might have been paint, spilled wine, or the remains of a tomato with enemies, but none of those possibilities improved the look on the doorman's face. You have a key to 3C? I asked. He did not answer. Someone sent the elevator down from the 3rd floor. Either your empty apartment has learned to operate machinery, or it has company. He opened a drawer beneath the desk, took out a ring of keys, and came around. The booth. My name is Samuel Pike, he said. If there is trouble, I did not cause it. That is a popular opening statement. We took the stairs. Pike went first, breathing heavily before we reached the 2nd landing. The 3rd floor corridor was covered with a green carpet that had been expensive before years of shoes had taught it humility. 3C stood halfway down the hall. Pike selected a key. The door was unlocked. He looked at me. Did you leave it that way? I locked it yesterday. Who has another key? Mr. Mercer, Mr. Cole, the building manager. 3 keys too many. I pushed the door open with the toe of my shoe. The first room was empty except for dust, faded wallpaper, and 3 wooden chairs stacked against the wall. A narrow passage led toward the rear. The air smelled of plaster, old wood, and something metallic. Wait here, I told Pike. He was willing. I moved down the passage. The 2nd room had once been a bedroom. Its curtains were closed and a bare bulb burned overhead. A man lay beside the window with one arm beneath him, and the other stretched toward a small writing table. He was in his 50s, with grey hair, a narrow face and a dark suit that had been cut for someone who preferred quality without advertisement. Blood had spread from a wound above his right ear and darkened the carpet. A brass fireplace tool lay near his hand. I did not touch him. Wolfe had been explicit about that, and besides, the man had reached the point where introductions could wait on C. The writing table stood a portable lamp, a square wooden box, and a sheet of cream-colored paper. The sheet appeared blank. 3 pinholes had been made near its lower edge. I went back to the hall. Pike, use the telephone downstairs. Call the police and tell them a man has been attacked in 3C. Do not improve the facts. His face had gone pale. Is he dead? Probably. Pike gripped the key ring. Who is he? You may know when you look at him, but you are not looking until the police arrive. He hurried toward the stairs. I returned to the room and telephoned Wolfe from the instrument on the writing table. It had no dial, only a button connecting it to the doorman's booth. That explained why the unknown caller had used a public telephone. Instead, Wolfe answered. I found old room 14, I said. It is now apartment 3C. There is a man on the floor with a broken head and a brass poker nearby. Dead? I have not examined him closely. Do so without disturbing him. I crouched beside the body and placed 2 fingers against the side of his neck. There was no pulse. His skin was still warm. He is dead. Identity. I checked the outside pockets carefully. His wallet contained $240, a driver's license, and several business cards. His name is Harold Tim, 53. Address on Riverside Drive. His card says he is secretary of the Mercer Historical Trust. There was silence for several seconds. "What is on the writing table?" Wolfe asked. "A lamp, a wooden box, and another sheet of expensive cream paper. Blank, except for 3 pinholes near the bottom." "Another?" "It matches the sheet. In our envelope. The sheet in our possession has pinholes." I pictured the paper as I had handled it that morning. The iodine fumes had exposed the diagram, and we had been interested in the marks that appeared, not in damage near the edge. I did not notice them. Your failure to notice something does not remove it from existence. That principle should be printed above my desk. "Examine the paper before you." I held it up by one corner. "Do not hold it toward the light," Wolfe snapped. I lowered it. "You have developed strong feelings about stationery. Observe the folds." I placed it flat on the table. 2 creases crossed the sheet, one vertical and one horizontal. It had been folded into quarters. It was folded twice. Though the box could hold it flat? I glanced at the wooden box. Its inside dimensions were larger than the sheet. Yes. Then, the folds were not for convenience. Are the pinholes aligned with either crease? I bent closer. When the lower section is folded upward, the 3 holes fall along the horizontal crease. When the right side is folded inward, one hole meets the vertical crease. Not sufficient. Fold it as the creases indicate. I thought touching things was forbidden. You have already announced the police. Before they arrive, determine what the sender intended. I folded the bottom half upward along the existing crease, then folded the right side across the left. The 3 pinholes overlapped imperfectly. Together, they formed the corners of a small triangle, all near the center of the folded square. "There is nothing there," I said. "Exactly. That is not usually helpful. The holes indicate a position. The folds transfer that position from the edge to the center. Something that should have occupied the center is absent. A word? Perhaps an object." I looked at the wooden box. It was made of cedar, with a shallow groove in its lid, shaped like an old-fashioned key. The same key had appeared in the red wax seal. I opened it carefully. At first glance, the box was empty, but its velvet lining contained an indentation. It was long, narrow, and toothed at one end. "A key was kept here," I said. "A real key?" "The impression says so, and it is missing. Along with the murderer, unless the dead man did the job himself and then objected to it." "Archie." "Yes?" "Before leaving the brownstone, did you replace our sheet in the envelope?" I put it in my inside pocket. "Take it out." I did. The cream paper looked harmless, which made it fit the case perfectly. "Examine." "The lower edge," Wolfe said. There they were. 3 pinholes so small I had dismissed them as flaws in the handmade paper. The sheet also had 2 folds, though the original envelope was large enough to have held it flat. I folded it along the creases. The holes converged at the point corresponding to the dark square in the diagram revealed by iodine. When the paper was opened again, the square lay near the center of the old room's plan. The diagram was not the entire message, I said. Clearly, the folds locate the dark square, and the holes identify something that once occupied that position. I looked around the room. The table stood near the center of the wall, but according to the crude plan, the marked square represented a section beside the fireplace. I crossed to it. The fireplace had been sealed with bricks and plaster. One brick near the lower right corner was darker than the others. I crouched and pressed it. It moved inward. Behind it was a narrow cavity. The cavity was empty. I heard footsteps in the corridor, followed by Samuel Pike's voice, and a heavier voice telling him to stay back. The police had arrived. "I found the hiding place," I told Wolfe. "It is empty." Then the missing address, the missing key, and the missing object are related. What object? That is the question for which a man has already been killed. Any instructions before New York's finest takes over? "Retain our sheet," mention it only if necessary. Observe who reacts to the empty cavity. That may include the entire police department. Then distinguish among them. The bedroom door opened. Inspector Kramer entered with Sergeant Stebbins behind him. Kramer stopped when he saw me holding the telephone. His broad face acquired the expression of a man who had opened his lunchbox and found me inside. "Goodwin," he said. Why did I know? Natural brilliance. "What are you doing here?" "Making a telephone call." He looked at the body, the brass poker, the open cedar box, and the displaced brick. Then he looked at the folded paper in my hand. "What is that?" I slipped it into my pocket. A letter. "What does it say?" "That is the trouble," I told him. "It does not say anything at all." Chapter 3. A visitor. With a warning, Inspector Kramer kept me at Mercer House for 2 hours, which was 1 hour and 59 minutes longer than either of us enjoyed. He questioned me in the empty apartment, in the corridor, and finally in a downstairs office that smelled of floor polish and old cigars. Sergeant Stebbins took notes with the patience of a man recording the decline of civilization. I gave them Harold Tim, the telephone warning, the reference to 3rd floor, room 14, and the fact that the old club room had become apartment. 3C. I did not give them the sheet in my pocket. That was not because Wolfe had ordered concealment. He had said to mention it only if necessary, and Kramer never made necessity attractive. The brass poker had no useful fingerprints. Tim's wallet had not been disturbed. His watch still occupied his vest pocket, and $240 remained in his billfold. The cedar box on the table had contained a key, judging by the velvet impression, but the key was gone. The cavity behind the loose brick was empty except for dust and a narrow strip of faded green ribbon. Kramer held the ribbon between 2 fingers. "You touch that?" he asked. I admired it from a distance. "You opened the cavity." I pressed a brick. "You always press bricks in strange apartments?" "Only when invited by dead men." His eyes went to my inside coat pocket. "What was on that paper?" "Nothing." "You expect me to believe Wolfe sent you across town carrying a blank sheet?" "He has sent me farther carrying less." Kramer planted both hands on the desk. "Goodwin, a man is dead. This is not one of Wolfe's private games. He dislikes games. They require movement. Hand it over." I considered the matter. Refusing outright would have produced an argument, a search, and possibly a ride downtown. Instead, I took out the sheet and held it by one corner. Kramer reached for it. "Careful. It has been treated with iodine vapor." He stopped. "Why?" "To bring out a diagram." "What diagram?" "It faded after exposure." That was true. The brown iodine lines were already pale, though still visible if you knew where to look. Kramer placed the sheet flat and examined the folds and pinholes. Stebbins leaned over his shoulder. "Looks empty." "That," I said, "has become its principal feature." Kramer looked up. "Where did you get it?" "It was delivered." "To Wolfe's house this morning." "By whom?" "A thin man in a grey cap who declined to leave a receipt." "Description?" "I gave it." "Why was it delivered to Wolfe?" "There was no address." "That makes no sense." "Wolfe thinks it makes excellent sense." Kramer swore under his breath. He placed the paper in an evidence envelope and wrote on it. I objected. "That belongs to Wolfe." "It belongs to a murder investigation." "Then give me a receipt." "Our messenger disliked them, but I am traditional. He gave me one because he knew I would keep talking until he did." When I left, the rain had stopped, but the city still looked wet and offended. I took a taxi to West 35th Street and reached the brownstone shortly before 5. Wolfe was in the office behind his desk, reading. A bottle of beer rested on the tray beside him. Fritz had drawn the curtains against the grey afternoon, and the room had its usual effect on me. After a dead man, an empty cavity, and 2 hours with Kramer, the globe, the bookshelves, and Wolfe's 1/7 of a ton looked almost homelike. I handed him Kramer's receipt. He read it. "You surrendered the paper." Kramer had reached the stage where he was considering my pockets public property. "You could have avoided that. By swallowing it? By foresight." "I will order some." I gave him the rest, including The strip of green ribbon and the absence of fingerprints on the poker. Tim had no appointment book. Wolfe asked. Not on him. The police found a keyring, but none of the keys fit the cedar box or the cavity. His office at the Mercer Historical Trust is being searched. Who identified the body? Samuel Pike, the doorman. He said Tim visited the building several times a month and used 3C whenever Mercer instructed him to examine old records. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Pike recognized Tim only after the police arrived. That is what he claimed. Yet he had worked there 11 years. He also claimed the apartment was empty. Words often become inaccurate when frightened men use them. The doorbell rang. I went to the hall. The man on the stoop was small, neat, and around 50. His brown overcoat was buttoned wrong. His hat brim was damp with perspiration rather than rain, and his eyes moved past me toward the office before settling on my face. "Mr. Wolfe," he asked, "you have reached the correct building. My name is Martin Vale. I must speak to him immediately." Martin was becoming a popular first name in the case, though the two men were entirely unrelated. The man who had offered us $5,000 had called himself Martin Cole, while this nervous little man was Martin Vale, a different person altogether. About what? An envelope. That admitted him. I took his hat and coat and led him to the red leather chair. Wolfe placed his book face down on the desk. "Mr. Vale," I said. "Mr. Wolfe." Vale did not sit until I indicated the chair. Even then he perched on its edge. "Did you receive an unusual envelope this morning?" he asked. Wolfe regarded him. "Define unusual." Vale moistened his lips. "It may have had no writing on the outside. Many envelopes are careless. This one was different." "How?" "I cannot explain. I only need to know whether it came." "You have not told me why." Vale's hands tightened around his knees. "You must not open it. That advice has arrived late." Vale rose, halfway from the chair. "You opened it." "Sit down." The two words were not loud. Vale sat. Wolfe leaned back. "Why should it have remained closed?" "Because a dangerous man is searching for it." "His name?" "Owen Pike." I stopped, on my way toward my desk. Wolfe's gaze shifted briefly to me, then returned to Vale. "Pike? Owen Pike. He has been looking for that envelope since yesterday. He knows it was intended for you." "Is he related to Samuel Pike, the doorman at Mercer House?" Vale's mouth opened. For several seconds nothing came out. "I do not know. Samuel Pike." "Archie did not say he was a doorman," Wolfe observed. "I did." Vale stared at him. Wolfe continued. "You are a bookkeeper?" Vale nodded. "For Mercer Shipping." "How long?" 18 years. "Do you keep the accounts of Elias Mercer personally?" "Some of them." "Did Harold Tim send the envelope?" Vale's face lost what little color it had. "I have never heard of Harold Tim. He was killed today in a room belonging to Mr. Mercer." Vale looked toward the door. I moved enough to make it clear that leaving would require a conversation with me. "You came here to warn us," Wolfe said. "You warned us not to open an envelope that you described only as unusual. You did not ask what it contained." "I assumed it contained a letter. You did not ask what the letter said. That is none of my business." "Then why is opening it dangerous?" Vale rubbed his palms together. "Because Owen Pike believes it proves something." "What?" "I do not know." "Phooey. You know the envelope contained no written message." Vale's head jerked up. Wolfe's lips moved slightly. "Had you believed it contained a conventional letter, your first concern would have been whether we had read it. Instead, you asked only whether we had opened the envelope. You expected the contents to appear harmless." Vale swallowed. "I was told it was blank." "By whom?" "I cannot say. You can. You prefer not to." Vale stood again. This time he stayed upright. "I have warned you. Owen Pike is violent. He has already threatened one man, and he will not stop because Nero Wolfe happens to be famous. Describe him. Vale hesitated. Tall, heavy shoulders, dark hair, about 45. That was the man who had called himself Martin Cole, though Vale had now identified him as Owen Pike. I said, "Does he smile pleasantly while lying?" Vale looked at me. "He was here at 2, I continued. He offered Wolfe $5,000 for the envelope. Vale's right hand went to the back of the chair. "He came here?" "He called himself Martin Cole." "That is one of his names. Is Owen Pike his real one?" "I believe so." "You believe many convenient things," Wolfe said. "Sit down and tell me what the key opens." Vale froze. Wolfe had not raised his voice, but the room changed. Even the traffic beyond the windows seemed to wait. "What key?" Vale asked. "The one represented by the red seal." Vale turned toward the hall. I stepped between him and the door. "You left your hat outside. New York has laws against naked heads." Wolfe said, "The envelope was sealed with dark red wax impressed by a key. You warned us about Owen Pike and the contents, yet I had not mentioned the seal. When I now refer to the key, you react as though I had placed it in your hand." Vale's face had gone grey. "I cannot help you," he said. "You came here for help. I came to keep you out of it." "You came to learn how much we know." Vale shook his head. "You do not understand what Mercer kept in that room." "Then improve my understanding." "I cannot." "Because you fear Owen Pike." Vale looked at Wolfe. "Because I fear what will happen if the key is found." "What does it open?" Vale took one step toward me. I did not move. Wolfe's voice came from behind him. "Mr. Vale, Harold Tim is dead. If you leave while withholding material information, you may soon explain yourself to Inspector Kramer. He is less comfortable than this chair." At Kramer's name, Vale's eyes widened. "The police know?" "They know Tim was killed in 3C. "Did they find the box?" "Yes." "Was it empty?" "That was another mistake, and he knew it as soon as he made it," Wolfe said softly. "You knew there was a box." Vale gripped the chair until his knuckles whitened. "The key was supposed to be in it," he whispered. "Supposed by whom?" "Harold." "So Tim sent the envelope." Vale looked toward the windows. "He said that if anything happened to him, Mr. Wolfe would know what to do. Why did he not come himself?" "He did not trust anyone." "Including you?" "Including everyone." Wolfe pressed the button for beer, though his current bottle was not empty. That meant he wanted Fritz to appear, either because he needed a witness or because Vale looked ready to collapse. "What did the key open?" Wolfe repeated. Vale's answer came reluctantly. "A ledger cabinet." "Where?" "I do not know." "You kept Mercer's accounts for 18 years and do not know where his ledger cabinet is?" "Not the company ledgers, the other books." "What other books?" Vale lowered his voice. "Private records, payments that never appeared in the company accounts, names, dates, properties, judges, officials, union men. Everything Mercer paid to keep quiet." Fritz entered carrying a fresh bottle and glass. Wolfe waited until he had placed them on the tray and left. "Blackmail records?" Wolfe asked. Vale shook his head. "Insurance. That was what Mercer called them. If anyone turned against him, he could ruin them. And Owen Pike wants the records. He wants the key. Without it, the cabinet cannot be opened without destroying what is inside." "That is absurd," I said. "A locksmith could open." Vale looked at me. "The lock contains a chemical charge. Force it and the papers burn." It sounded theatrical, but his fear did not. Wolfe poured beer. "Who designed such a cabinet?" "Elias Mercer's father. He collected mechanical locks. The cabinet was built into one of his properties years ago." "Which property?" "I never knew." "Who does?" Vale's lips trembled. "The person who received the envelope." Wolfe's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. "The envelope was intended to identify the cabinet's location. Harold said the blank letter would show the way, but only to someone who understood why it was blank." "Why Wolfe?" I asked him. He said Mr. Wolfe would notice what everyone else ignored. A compliment ordinarily pleased Wolfe when properly presented. This one did not. He drank and set down the glass. "You warned us not to open it," he said. "Yet Tim wished us to understand it." Vale stared at the floor. "You were not protecting us from Pike," Wolfe continued. "You were trying to prevent us from finding the cabinet." "That is not true." "It is transparently true. You came after learning Tim was dead. You wished to discover whether the envelope had arrived and whether we had solved its purpose. Owen Pike may indeed be dangerous, but he is also useful to you as a threat." Vale backed away from the chair. "I have said too much. You have said too little." I moved when he did, but he surprised me. Instead of heading for the office door, he reached into his coat pocket. My hand was on his wrist before the object. Cleared the cloth. It was not a gun. It was a small red wax disc, broken at one edge, bearing the impression of a key. Wolfe said, "Bring it to me." I took it from Vale and placed it on Wolfe's desk. The seal resembled the one from our envelope, but it was not identical. The key's teeth pointed in the opposite direction. Wolfe examined it with the reading glass. "Where did you get this?" Vale's voice was barely audible. "From Harold Tim's desk." "When?" "This morning. Before or after his death." "I do not know when he died." That was not my question. Vale looked at me, at the door, and finally at Wolfe. "Before," he said. "At 8 o'clock. He was alive when I left him." "What did he tell you?" "That the wrong key had already been sent." Wolfe's eyes became half-closed. What did he mean? Vale shook his head. He would not explain. He only said that the envelope had no address because the address itself was false. A car door slammed outside. Vale flinched so violently that the chair moved. He rushed toward the hall. I caught his sleeve, but the cloth tore at the shoulder seam, leaving me with a strip of brown fabric. He reached the front door, snatched his hat from the rack, and was down the steps before I could stop him without knocking Fritz's umbrella stand across the hall. I followed to the sidewalk. Vale ran east. At the corner, a tall man stepped from a dark sedan. It was the visitor who had called himself Martin Cole. Vale stopped. The tall man took his arm and guided him into the car. Vale did not resist, but he turned once and looked back at me through the rain-dimmed air. The sedan pulled away. I returned to the office with the torn cloth in my hand. "Owen Pike has collected him," I said. Wolfe was studying the broken seal. "Perhaps." "You doubt Vale?" "I doubt everyone who arrives with a warning and leaves with his warning contradicted." I dropped the cloth on my desk. "Do we call Kramer?" "Soon." That word has dangerous flexibility. Wolfe placed the two seal impressions side by side, the original dark red seal from the envelope and the broken disc Vale had carried. The keys appeared similar until you looked at the teeth. One faced left, the other faced right. The wrong key was sent, I said. So Vale reported. "What does that mean?" Wolfe leaned back and closed his eyes. "It means, Archie, that the blank paper did not direct us toward what was missing." I waited. It directed us toward what had been substituted. Outside, a horn sounded on 35th Street. In the kitchen, Fritz began moving dishes for dinner. The ordinary life of the brownstone continued, but the case had changed shape. We had started with an envelope that carried no address and a letter containing no words. Now we had two seals, two keys, two men using false names, and one dead secretary, who had apparently arranged every clue while trusting no one alive. Wolfe opened his eyes. "Get Mr. Mercer on the telephone. At home or at his office?" "Both. Tell him Harold Tim is dead and that we possess the wrong key. We possess only its picture. That distinction may matter to us. It need not matter to him." I reached for the telephone. Before I touched it, the bell rang. Once, then a longer ring, the same signal the thin messenger had used that morning. I looked at Wolfe. He looked at the red seals on his desk. "Archie," he said. This time do not permit him to leave. Chapter 4. The House on Riddle Street. The man at the door was not the thin messenger in the grey cap. He was a boy of perhaps 17, soaked from the shoulders down and breathing as if he had run most of the way from Brooklyn. He held out a folded piece of paper. For Archie Goodwin. You have identified him. He pushed the paper at me. A man paid me $10 to bring it. He said not to wait. What man? Tall fellow in a dark coat. He was standing outside a drugstore on 8th Avenue. Did he give a name? The boy shook his head and began backing down the stoop. I caught his sleeve. You heard the bell signal? He told me how to ring. Did he have a car? A black sedan. There was another man in the back. Describe him. Small. Brown coat. Looked sick. Martin Vale. I released the boy, gave him another $1 for remembering, and carried the paper into the office. Wolfe had not moved. The 2 red seals lay before him like rival signatures. The message was written in pencil. Riddle Street, number 19. Come alone if Vale is to remain alive. Beneath it, someone had drawn a key with its teeth pointing left. I handed it to Wolfe. He read it twice. Crude. You prefer invitations engraved? I prefer threats that do not insult intelligence. If they intended you to come alone, they would not have sent the message to a house occupied by both of us. That may be because nobody expects you to come. A reasonable expectation. I looked up Riddle Street in the city directory. It was a narrow block on the lower west side, squeezed between warehouses near the river. Number 19 was listed as property of the Crane estate and marked vacant. Crane, I said. Vale told us about Harold Tim. Pike told no stories yet. Now the house belongs to a Crane estate. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Telephone Saul Panzer. Saul answered on the second attempt. He was one of the few men Wolfe trusted to use judgment. Without borrowing any, Wolfe instructed him to meet me 2 doors east of number 19 and to bring a flashlight. You are sending Saul, although the note says alone, I said. The author of the note has already lied by implication. We need not reward him. What about Kramer? Not yet. A wounded bookkeeper may consider that selfish. A living bookkeeper will forgive me. A dead one will not complain. I got my coat and shoulder holster. Before I left, Wolfe pointed at the broken seal Vale had brought. Take it. The evidence? The question. I put it in a small envelope and slipped it into my pocket. Riddle Street deserved its name. It was short, crooked, badly lighted, and seemed uncertain where it belonged. The buildings on one side were old brick houses left behind by a neighborhood that had moved uptown. On the other side stood warehouses with steel shutters and loading platforms. The river wind came between them, smelling of rain, coal smoke, and machinery. Saul waited beneath the awning of a closed tailor shop. He wore a dark raincoat and a hat that made him look like a man whose business was nobody else's. Vale? He asked. Inside, perhaps. Pike, too. How many? The note did not include a guest list. We approached number 19 from the rear through an alley. The house was 4 stories high and narrow enough to have been designed by a tax collector. Boards covered the lower windows, but a faint light showed through a crack on the second floor. The rear door had been forced recently. Fresh splinters marked the frame. Saul touched my arm and pointed upward. Voices came through an open window. One belonged to the tall man who had visited Wolfe as Martin Cole and whom Vale had identified as Owen Pike. The second voice was deeper and impatient. The third had a dry, careful quality. They are searching, Saul whispered. For the key or the lock? We entered. The kitchen was empty except for a broken chair, a rusted stove, and enough dust to prove that no Fritz Brenner had ever tolerated the premises. A passage led to the front hall. Light leaked down the staircase. We climbed without conversation. The voices came from the rear room on the second floor. I reached the doorway first. Owen Pike stood beside a writing desk, his dark coat thrown over a chair. He had removed the pleasant smile he had worn in Wolfe's office. Without it, his face looked heavier and more dangerous. 2 men were with him. One was broad, bald, and equipped with fists suitable for opening crates. The other was thin, elderly, and wore steel-rimmed spectacles. He was examining the wall panels with a pocket knife. Martin Vale sat on the floor near the window. His hands were tied in front of him. A bruise darkened his left cheek. Pike saw me and put his hand inside his jacket. "Leave it there," Saul said from behind my shoulder. Pike looked at him, then at me. His hand came out empty. Vale tried to stand. "Goodwin, you should choose your rides more carefully," I told him. The bald man moved toward us. Saul shifted half a step, and the man decided to remain where he was. I entered the room. It had once been a study. Bookshelves covered one wall, though most of the books were gone. A faded carpet lay beneath a large writing desk. 3 electric lamps had been connected by temporary cords running through the hall. On the desk were 7 cream-colored envelopes. Each bore the dark red wax seal of a key. Each had once carried an address, but the address had been removed. Not erased, covered, or scratched out. A neat rectangle had been cut from the front of every envelope. I picked up the nearest one by its edge. "Put that down," Pike said. "You offered Wolfe $5,000 for one envelope. 7 should. Improve your mood." "They are mine. You told us the first envelope belonged to your employer. I was being diplomatic. You were being Martin Cole." Pike's jaw tightened. Vale said, "Do not believe him. Those belong to Harold." "Crane," I turned. "Who is Harold Crane?" The elderly man with spectacles answered. He was a lawyer. This was his house. Was? He died 12 years ago. The name fitted the property record. It did not fit the body in apartment 3C. I looked at Vale. "Yesterday you were talking about Harold Tim." "Tim worked for Crane before he joined the Mercer Trust," Vale said. "He was Crane's confidential clerk. After Crane died, Tim kept his private records." Pike gave a short laugh. "Vale has discovered honesty under pressure." "Try it yourself," I suggested. "Why are the addresses missing?" Pike nodded toward the envelopes. "Crane prepared them before his death. Each was intended for someone connected with the Mercer inheritance." "What inheritance?" The thin man with spectacles closed his knife. "Elias Mercer's uncle, Josiah Mercer, died in 1919. His will divided the family fortune among 4 heirs. One heir, Matthew Mercer, disappeared before the estate was settled." "Convenient." "Extremely," Pike said. "His share passed to Elias Mercer's father." Years later, Crane found evidence that Matthew had not disappeared. He had been confined under a false name in a private hospital. Vale struggled against the cord around his wrists. Crane believed the inheritance had been stolen. "Believed?" I asked. "He had proof," Vale said. "Names, payments, affidavits. Tim hid them after Crane died." "In the ledger cabinet?" Vale nodded. "Where is it?" Pike stepped closer. "That is what we are trying to learn." I held up one of the mutilated envelopes. "By removing addresses?" "The addresses were already gone when we arrived," Pike said. "Who arrived first?" Nobody answered. That made it a useful question. Saul moved to the desk and examined the envelopes without touching them. "The cuts are old," he said. "Paper edges have darkened." The elderly man nodded. "Years old." "Your name?" I asked him. "Edwin Marsh." "I represented one branch of the Mercer family." "And the large gentleman?" "Leon Baird," Pike said. "He handles practical matters." Baird looked pleased by the description. I went to Vale and cut the cord with my pocket knife. His hands shook as circulation returned. "Why did you run from Wolfe's office?" I asked. "I saw Pike's car." "So you entered it willingly?" "He said he knew where Harold had hidden the cabinet. I thought I could persuade him to take me there." Pike snorted. "He thought he could follow me and then telephone Wolfe." "That would have been less foolish than what happened." Vale rubbed his wrists. "Pike brought me here. He said Crane had marked the location in the envelopes, but the addresses had been cut away." Wolfe's voice was not available, so I borrowed his habit of looking at things longer than they deserved. 7 envelopes. 7 missing addresses. 7 red key seals. I removed Vale's broken seal from my pocket and placed it beside them. Marsh bent forward. Where did you get that? Vale brought it to Wolfe. Marsh's face tightened. That seal is reversed, we noticed. Pike reached for it. Saul blocked his hand. What does the reversed key mean? I asked. Marsh looked toward Pike before answering. Crane used it to mark a false copy. A false envelope? Or a false document, Vale whispered. Harold said the wrong. Key had been sent. I examined the seals on the 7 envelopes. 4 keys had teeth pointing left. 3 had teeth pointing right. There are 3 false copies, I said. Perhaps, Marsh replied. Or 3 warnings. Pike's patience ended. We are wasting time. Crane hid the evidence in this house. Tim knew where. The blank paper sent to Wolfe was meant to identify it. Then why threaten Wolfe? I did not threaten him. You sent the note. Sent nothing. You abducted Vale. He entered my car, Vale said. Then he tied my hands. That was after he tried to run. Their affection for fine distinctions was becoming tiresome. I turned to the writing desk. It had 8 small drawers, 4 on each side, and a wide central drawer. All stood open. Papers had been scattered across the floor. One space in the dust on the desktop was clean, rectangular, about the size of the cedar box found beside Harold Tim's body. Tim brought the key box here, I said. Vale stared. How do you know? It left a calling card in the dust. Pike moved toward the desk. When? Before I could answer, the electric lamps went out. The room vanished. Someone struck my shoulder. A chair fell. Vale shouted. Saul said something sharp, followed by the sound of a body hitting the wall. Then a shot cracked in the darkness. The muzzle flash came from near the desk. A second later, glass shattered. I dropped low, reached forward, and caught a trouser leg. The owner kicked free. Footsteps pounded toward the hall. Saul's flashlight came on. Its beam crossed Baird crouching near the bookshelves, Marsh pressed against the wall, and Pike standing beside the window with his right hand empty. Martin Vale lay beside the writing. Desk blood spread across his shirt near the shoulder. I reached him. He was breathing, but badly. The bullet had entered high on the right side, and I could not see whether it had left. Saul, telephone. He was already moving. Pike bent toward Vale. Stay back, I said. I did not shoot him. Everyone says that before being asked. Marsh pointed at the desk. One of the envelopes is gone. I counted. 6 remained. The envelope nearest. The clean rectangle had disappeared. The temporary wires in the hall had been cut, not unplugged. Whoever killed the lights had planned the darkness. Whoever fired had either aimed at Vale or at something he had been reaching for. Vale's left hand was clenched beneath him. I eased it open. He held a small rectangle of paper, the portion cut from an envelope. An address was written on it in faded black ink. Nero Wolfe, West 35th Street. New York City. Pike read it over my shoulder. That is impossible. Why? Crane died 12 years ago. He could not have addressed an envelope to Wolfe about this case. Wolfe was alive 12 years ago, but Crane never knew him. Vale's eyes opened. He tried to speak. I leaned close. The address, he whispered. It was never missing. Then his eyes closed again. A siren sounded somewhere beyond the river warehouses. I looked at the scrap in my hand, the 6 mutilated envelopes, and the dark red keys pointing in opposite directions. The first envelope had come to Wolfe without an address. These envelopes had lost theirs by design, yet one missing rectangle carried Wolfe's name, written years before Harold Tim had been murdered. The house on Riddle Street had not given us the hidden evidence. It had given us proof that Nero Wolfe had been chosen long before the case began. Chapter 5. The missing address Martin Vale was still breathing when the ambulance men carried him down the narrow stairs of number 19 Riddle Street. That was the best fact available, though it had competition from several bad ones. The bullet had passed through his upper chest without touching the heart, according to the doctor who arrived with the police. It had damaged a lung, which was serious enough to satisfy Inspector Kramer and uncertain enough to keep the rest of us from making predictions. Vale opened his eyes once while they were lifting him onto the stretcher. His lips moved. I leaned close. "The address," he whispered. "It was never written." Then he lost consciousness. That corrected what I thought I had heard beside the desk. It also made the scrap in my pocket more troublesome. The rectangle of paper bore Wolfe's name and West 35th Street in faded ink, but Vale insisted that no address had ever been written. Either he was confused from losing blood, or the words on the scrap were not what they appeared to be. Kramer arrived. Before the stretcher reached the front door, he came into the upstairs room with Sergeant Stebbins, 2 uniformed men, and enough irritation to furnish the house. He looked at Vale's blood, the cut wires, the broken window, and me. "You again. I am beginning to think you follow me." "Who? Fired?" "I was hoping you had brought that information." Kramer turned toward Pike, Marsh, and Baird. They had remained in the room because Saul and I had made departure unattractive. Baird had a swelling above his left eyebrow from an encounter with the wall during the darkness. Marsh had recovered his spectacles. Pike looked calm, which required either innocence or practice. Kramer pointed at Pike. "Name." "Owen Pike." I said, "He also answers to Martin Cole when carrying large checks." Kramer's head turned. "The man who tried to buy Wolfe's envelope?" "The same." Pike gave me a flat look. "I offered payment for property that belonged to my employer." "You have not yet selected an employer," I said. Kramer ordered Stebbins to search everyone. They found no gun. The shot had shattered the upper pane of the rear window. A bullet was later recovered from the wooden frame outside, which meant the weapon had been fired toward Vale and slightly upward. Powder marks on Vale's shirt suggested the muzzle had been no more than 4 feet away. That placed the shooter near the writing desk. Unfortunately, during the blackout, everyone had been near the writing desk or claimed to have been pushed there. Kramer took possession of the 6 envelopes, the severed electrical wire, Vale's torn coat, and every loose paper in the room. He also took the names and addresses of Saul, Pike, Marsh, Baird, and me, although he already knew 2 of mine. I kept the address scrap. This was not a heroic act. During the confusion, I had slipped it into my pocket before the police arrived. By the time Kramer began collecting evidence, admitting that I had withheld it would have produced a lecture, a search, and possibly a reconsideration of our friendship. He questioned me about the missing 7th envelope. "It was on the desk before the lights failed," I said. "After the shot, it was gone." "Who was closest?" "Vale." "Besides Vale?" Pike stood near the window. Marsh was at the wall. Baird was by the shelves. Saul and I were near the door. And in the dark? In the dark, geometry became unreliable. Kramer looked at Pike. "Why were you here?" "To recover documents belonging to the Mercer estate." "What documents?" "Evidence concerning an inheritance dispute." "What inheritance?" Pike smiled without pleasure. "That would require a lawyer." "You have one?" Edwin Marsh raised a hand slightly. "I am an attorney." Kramer gave him a long look. "Naturally." It was after midnight when I reached the brownstone. Wolfe had eaten dinner without me, which he considered justice. Fritz had kept a plate warm, which he considered civilization. I reported in the office while eating cold pheasant that Fritz had refused to reheat because the sauce would suffer. Wolfe sat behind his desk with his fingers resting on the chair, arms and his eyes closed. He did not interrupt until I described the scrap bearing his address. "Show it to me." I placed it on the blotter. He picked it up with the small silver tongs he used for delicate objects and studied it beneath the lamp. "The handwriting is old," I said. "The ink is old." "There is a difference?" "A significant one. Ink may be placed on paper long after it is manufactured and may be artificially aged. Handwriting has no age except through comparison." He examined the edges. "This was cut from one of the envelopes. It matched the missing rectangles. Yet Mr. Vale said the address was never written. He had a bullet through him. I allow him one confusing sentence. Do not be generous with evidence." Wolfe turned the scrap over. The back was ED, blank, but the paper fibers along the edges were darker than the center. "This rectangle was not cut from an envelope recently," he said. "It was stored separately for years." That supports Pike's claim that Crane prepared the envelopes. It supports nothing beyond age. I finished the pheasant and gave him the rest, including the missing 7th envelope and the shot's direction. Who cut the lights? Wolfe asked. The temporary cable was sliced in the hall. Could Pike have done it? He was in the room when it happened. Could Baird? Same answer. Marsh? The same. Vale? He was tied until I released him. Saul? He was with me. Then someone else was in the house. Or one of them prepared a delayed cut. Wolfe grunted. A candle, acid, or weighted blade could have severed the insulation after an interval. Did the police examine the wire? They collected it. Then Kramer may eventually discover what you should have observed. I was busy with the shooting. Gunfire distracts you too easily. He put the scrap inside an envelope and locked it away. The next morning began with orchids, breakfast, and no murder, though the last item was temporary. At 10:30, Saul arrived carrying a packet of photographs. Before Kramer had taken possession of the Riddle Street papers, Saul had used a small camera to photograph the desk, the envelopes, the cut-out spaces, and several scattered pages. I had not seen him do it. That was one reason Wolfe paid him well. Wolfe arranged the photographs across his desk after returning from the plant rooms at 11. We had the original blank letter no longer, since Kramer had taken it, but Saul had photographed it at Mercer House before the police sealed it in evidence. Wolfe also had the original envelope with the dark red key seal, which Kramer had somehow overlooked because it had remained at the brownstone. The photographs from Riddle Street showed the 6 remaining envelopes, their removed address panels, and the old writing desk. One photograph included a thick city directory lying open on the floor beside the desk. Wolfe pointed to it. What year? Saul leaned closer. 1920. Did you examine it? Only long enough to see that several pages were marked. Marked how? Small punctures near the margins. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, telephone Mr. Kramer and ask whether the city directory was removed from the house. That should be pleasant. It was not. Kramer wanted to know why Wolfe cared about an old directory, what we had withheld, and whether I had stolen anything from Riddle Street. I answered the first question with ignorance, the second with injury, and the third with a statement about my upbringing. After 4 minutes, he admitted the directory was in the evidence room. Borrow it, Wolfe said when I hung up. From Kramer? Use persuasion. What form? The successful form. It took a telephone call from Wolfe to the district attorney and another from the district attorney to Kramer. By 2 o'clock, Sergeant Stebbins delivered the directory in a brown evidence bag. He remained in the office to watch it, which showed that Kramer's trust in us was developing normally. The book was large, heavy, and bound in cracked black cloth. Its title identified it as a New York City commercial directory for 1920. Several pages had been folded at the corners. Others contained small pinholes. Wolfe had Fritz bring clean gloves, a magnifying lens, and a sheet of transparent tracing paper. He directed me to copy the exact dimensions of the blank letter from Saul's photograph. You are reconstructing it, I asked. The paper was folded twice. Its dimensions and crease positions can be estimated accurately from the photograph. I cut the tracing sheet to size and marked the 3 pinholes near its lower edge. Wolfe folded it along the photographed creases, opened it, and placed it over the directory. Stebbins watched with the expression of a man attending a magic performance he intended to arrest. What page? I asked. That is what we must determine. Wolfe examined the photographed envelopes. Each seal showed a key, 4 pointed left, 3 right. The missing envelope had been nearest a handwritten list of street names. The list read, Harrow Court, Cedar Bank, Briar Place, Riddle Street, Mercer House, West, 35th Street. The first letters were H, C, B, R, M, W. Wolfe turned pages in the directory until he reached the street index. Then he selected the section containing old property names and private institutions. He placed the transparent sheet over one page. The holes pointed to meaningless spaces. He tried another page. Again, nothing. Stebbins shifted his weight. How long does this take? Wolfe ignored him. He studied the folds rather than the holes, moving the sheet so that the vertical crease aligned with the directory's central column. The horizontal crease crossed a listing for Harrow Court. One pinhole rested over the letter. The second fell over C in the next column. The third touched B near the bottom of the page. H. C. B, I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. He removed the sheet and examined the page beneath it. The three letters belonged to separate listings. Harrow Children's Home, Crane Brothers, Attorneys. Briarbank Hospital. All three had occupied addresses. On the same block in 1920 Riddle Street. Saul leaned over the desk. The old children's home became number 19, Wolfe nodded. Harold Crane's house. The hospital? I asked. Wolfe moved his finger down the page. Briarbank Hospital occupied numbers 21 through 25. It closed in 1924. And Crane Brothers? Number 17. 3 neighboring properties. H, C, and B. Stebbins said, "What does that prove?" Wolfe looked at him. "It proves that the holes are not random damage. The blank sheet was designed as a mask. When placed over the correct page and aligned by its folds, the punctures identify 3 initials. Why not write the initials? Because words could be read by anyone who intercepted the letter. A blank page would be dismissed unless the recipient understood that its emptiness was deliberate. I looked at the directory, Harrow Children's Home, Crane Brothers, and Briarbank Hospital. What connects them besides the street? The inheritance, Saul said. Wolfe turned to him. Explain. Matthew Mercer disappeared in 1919. Pike claimed he had been confined under a false name in a private hospital. Briarbank, I said. And if a lawyer arranged it, Saul continued. Crane Brothers may have held the records. Wolfe's finger rested on the first listing. Harrow Children's Home may identify the beneficiary. Or a child, I said. Wolfe closed the directory carefully. Indeed, Stebbins held out his hand. I am taking the book back. You may do so after Archie photographs the page, Stebbins objected. Wolfe stared at him. I took the photograph. When Stebbins left, Wolfe rang for beer. The initials lead to Riddle Street, I said. We have already searched number 19. You searched one house. The directory names 3. Precisely. Crane's office at 17, his house at 19, and the hospital beginning at 21. The addresses were later changed when the properties were divided. That is why a modern address would mislead. I looked at the blank envelope, so the missing address was never written because the sheet itself supplied it. Not a street number, Wolfe said. A sequence. Harrow, Crane, Briarbank. H, C, B. What order? The folds. Determine it. He placed the reconstructed sheet over the photograph again. First, the lower fold brought H toward the center. Then the side fold brought C over it. B remained beneath both. H over C over B, I said. Or begin at Harrow, pass through Crane, and descend to Briarbank. Descend? Wolfe tapped the word hospital in the directory. The old buildings shared service passages. Hospitals required coal tunnels, laundry access, and private entrances. A property owner wishing to move a patient unseen would not use the street. Saul said, There may be a passage beneath the houses. Wolfe nodded. I reached for my coat. He stopped, me with a raised finger. First, Archie, telephone the hospital. Briarbank closed more than 30 years ago. Institutions die less completely than men. Their records survive in archives, courts, insurance companies, and frightened bookkeepers. I searched the newer directory and found that Briarbank's records had been transferred to St. Aldwyn Medical Archive on East 68th Street. The archivist answered after 3 calls and a discussion involving Wolfe's name, a possible murder, and the district attorney. She located the 1919 patient register. There was no Matthew Mercer. There was, however, a Matthew Harrow, admitted on November 3, 1919, by order of attorney Harold Crane. His fees had been paid through a private account controlled by Elias Mercer's father. The patient had died in 1926. No burial place was recorded. I relayed every word. Wolfe sat motionless. Matthew Harrow, I said. The missing Mercer was hidden under the name of the children's home. Perhaps. Crane arranged the confinement, apparently, and Briarbank kept him until he died, according to the register. That gives us fraud, unlawful confinement, and a stolen inheritance. It gives us records that may have been fabricated. I put down the telephone. You refuse to enjoy progress. I refuse to confuse direction with arrival. Saul picked up the photograph of the desk. The seventh envelope may contain the next mask. Or the key, I said. Wolfe's eyes went to the red seal. The seal does not merely represent a key. It gives an instruction. The left-facing impression means turn left. The reversed impression means turn right. Directions through the tunnel? Possibly. The office telephone rang. I answered. A woman's voice said, Mr. Goodwin, Martin Vale has regained consciousness. The hospital? Yes, he asked for Mr. Wolfe. He says he knows who shot him. Who is speaking? There was a pause. Clara Tim. Harold Tim was my husband. Before I could ask where she had been since his murder, she continued, Mr. Vale also says the missing envelope is in the hospital room with him. Then the line went dead. I turned toward Wolfe. He had heard enough from my side to understand. The seventh envelope has surfaced, I said. Wolfe folded his hands over his middle, or someone wishes us to believe it has. Vale knows who shot him. If he does, the shooter knows he survived. I reached for my coat again. This time Wolfe did not stop me. Take Saul, he said, and Archie. Yes? Do not permit Mr. Vale to open the envelope. Why? Wolfe looked at the 3 letters marked by the pinholes. Because the first blank page pointed toward a place. The second may point toward a person, and someone has already killed to keep that name unwritten. Chapter 6. The Locked Bank Box Seat. Aldwyn Hospital had improved its entrance since the days when sick people were expected to approach illness through grey stone and iron gates. The lobby contained polished floors, quiet nurses, and enough flowers to suggest that disease could be embarrassed into leaving. Saul and I reached Martin Vale's room 12 minutes after Clara Tim telephoned. We found a policeman outside the door, a nurse inside it, and no Clara Tim anywhere. Vale lay propped against 2 pillows. His face had the color of old paper, and a rubber tube ran from beneath the bandages around his chest to a glass container beside the bed. His eyes were open but heavy. A cream-colored envelope rested on the table near his right hand. It bore a red wax seal. The key in the seal pointed left. Who brought that? I asked the nurse. A woman who said she was his sister. Description? About 45. Dark coat, brown hair, very calm. Did she give a name? Clara Vale. The policeman frowned. She told me she was Mrs. Tim. I moved toward the envelope. Vale's fingers closed around it. Do not, he whispered. That was Wolfe's instruction too. It is pleasant when patients cooperate. Saul checked the window, the wardrobe, and the bathroom. The room was otherwise empty. Where is Clara Tim? I asked. Vale's eyes shifted toward the door. She is not Clara Tim. I had reached that conclusion without medical training. Clara Tim was only one of her names. She worked for Harold Crane. Harold Crane has been dead 12 years. Not for Harold. For his brother. Which brother? Vale swallowed painfully. Caleb. That supplied a C, but I had learned not to celebrate initials. Who shot you? Vale looked at the policeman. I told the officer. Inspector Kramer wants the answer. The officer had no reason to believe me, but he had heard my name and knew Wolfe's. He stepped into the corridor where he could still see us through the glass panel. Vale whispered, I did not see. You told the woman you knew. I told her that so she would come. That was brave. It was stupid. Those often travel together. His grip tightened on the envelope. She wanted this. What is inside? Another blank. Sheet. You opened it. The seal was already broken when I woke. That was not encouraging. I examined the wax without touching it. A fine crack crossed the key impression, and the flap had been lifted, then pressed down again. Where? Did you get it? I had it at Riddle Street. You were searched. I hid it beneath the desk before Pike tied me. Then who recovered it? The woman. She said she found it before the police arrived. That places her inside the house during the shooting. Vale closed his eyes. Was she the person who cut the lights? I do not know. Was she the person who fired? His breathing became shallow. The nurse moved closer, but he raised one finger. HCB, he said. You have it wrong. Wrong. How? Not Harrow, Crane, Briarbank. Then what? Hudson City Bank. The nurse ordered him to stop talking. I ordered myself not to grin, because patients with punctured lungs dislike enthusiasm. Where is Hudson City Bank? Broad Street. Harold Crane rented a private box there before he died. Box number? 314. The pencil. Number on Elias Mercer's check returned to mind. What is in it? Vale shook his head. Crane's evidence, the original will, hospital records, payment ledgers, a statement signed by Matthew Mercer. Who has the key? Tim had it. The cedar box in apartment 3C was empty. Owen Pike took it. Before or after Tim was killed? Vale's eyes opened. Pike says after. And you believe him? I believe nobody. That was the healthiest thing he had said. Saul stood beside the window, watching the street below. What does the envelope have to do with the bank? Vale looked at the cream paper on the table. The box requires two forms of proof: the physical key and the registered address Crane gave when he rented it. You mean an ordinary street address? Not ordinary. The bank's private boxes were opened under sealed instructions. The applicant had to state the exact address, entered in the register. Without it, the key was useless. I thought of the blank envelope, the missing panels cut from the others, and the sheet designed to point toward HCB. The envelope represented the bank box, I said. The seal represented the key, Vale nodded weakly, and the absent address represented the second requirement. Another nod. Saul said, someone cut the address from every surviving envelope so Crane's heirs could not identify it. Vale's lips moved. Not identify it. Recite it. The difference mattered. A bank clerk might refuse a deed, a photograph, or a family history, but accept the exact words registered with the box. What was the address? I asked. Vale turned his face toward the wall. I never knew. The nurse ended the interview. Vale's pulse had accelerated, his breathing had worsened, and she possessed the authority of someone willing to summon larger nurses. I took the envelope. The policeman objected. I gave him Kramer's name, Wolfe's name, and my card. He telephoned downstairs. While he was busy, Saul and I left with the envelope. That was not theft. It was acceleration. We telephoned Wolfe from the lobby. He listened without interrupting. HCB is Hudson City Bank, I concluded. Box 314. It requires a key and the registered address. The missing address is the second half of the combination. Indeed. You sound disappointed. I am displeased with premature conclusions, including my own. That is almost humility. It is accuracy. The woman who called herself Clara Tim may have been at Riddle Street. Vale says she worked for Caleb Crane. Where is she now? Somewhere outside the hospital, unless she has acquired another relative upstairs. Return at once. Bring the envelope unopened. The seal is already broken, then bring it no further opened. Saul stayed to watch Vale. I took a taxi back to West 35th Street. Wolfe was at his desk when I entered. Fritz had placed beer and a bowl of salted almonds on the tray. The city directory lay open beside photographs from Riddle Street. I handed Wolfe the envelope. He used the silver tongs to lift the flap. Inside was a blank sheet folded twice. 3 pinholes marked the lower edge, but their spacing differed from the first sheet. Wolfe unfolded it. The paper is thinner, I said. The paper is newer. Substitution? Possibly. He measured the folds with a ruler, then placed the sheet over the photographed directory page. The holes did not point to H, C, and B. They fell over 3 numbers. The Riddle Street properties, I said. Read, in what order? The folds put 19 first, then 17, Then 21. House, law office, hospital. Wolfe moved the paper again. The numbers aligned only when the sheet was turned upside down. Now. 21. 17. 19. Hospital, lawyer, house. He grunted. I said, which sequence gives the bank address? Neither directly. He examined the paper beneath the lamp, then rubbed one fold between his fingers. This sheet was folded after the holes were made. Important? Extremely. The first sheet was punctured after folding, its holes aligned through multiple layers. On this sheet, each puncture passes through only one layer. So it is a copy made by someone who understood the appearance, but not the method. Precisely. The woman brought Vale a false envelope, or Vale presented us with one. I sat at my desk. You think he arranged the hospital performance? I think a man who claims not to know the registered address has nevertheless explained the bank's full procedure with confidence. He was Crane's bookkeeper. He was Mercer's bookkeeper. That distinction had teeth, the telephone. Rang, it was Kramer. He had learned that I had taken the hospital envelope and expressed his feelings in language Fritz would not permit near the dining table. When he finished, I said, "Come collect it. Wolfe has something better." Kramer arrived. 25 minutes later with Stebbins, he entered the office without removing his coat. "Where is it?" Wolfe indicated the envelope. Kramer reached for it. "Sit down," Wolfe said. "I did not come to sit." "Then stand and remain ignorant." Kramer's face reddened, but he sat in the red leather chair. Stebbins remained behind him. Wolfe explained. Hudson City Bank, Box 314, the key requirement and the registered address. He did not mention that our original sheet had been taken by Kramer, since Kramer knew it. "Why has nobody gone to the bank?" Kramer demanded. "Because the bank closed at 3. It opens tomorrow." "Indeed. By then every interested party will know the same." "Who has the key?" "Owen Pike, according to Mr. Vale." Kramer looked at me. "Did Pike admit that?" "He admitted nothing except having expensive habits." Wolfe picked up the false sheet from the hospital. "This was manufactured recently. The holes and folds are imitations. Someone wished us to accept Hudson City Bank as the entire solution." "You think it is not?" "I think it is only part of it." Kramer leaned forward. "There is a box." "Probably." Crane rented it. Apparently. It requires an address. So we are told. "Then find the address." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "That is what Mr. Tim intended. The first envelope carried no written address, because writing one would have defeated its purpose. The recipient was expected to reconstruct it from external records. The city directory? Partly. I said, "The address panels removed from the Riddle Street envelopes were cut away years ago." Wolfe nodded. "They were not removed, merely to conceal destinations. They were removed because each carried a component of the registered address. Whoever possessed all 7 could arrange them according to the sealed directions and recover the phrase." Kramer stared at the photographs. 7 envelopes, 7 pieces. 6 remain in police custody. 1 vanished during the shooting. The one Vale had, or claimed to have. Kramer looked at Stebbins. "Get the evidence photographs." Stebbins telephoned headquarters. While we waited, Wolfe asked Fritz to bring coffee for Kramer and beer for himself. Kramer accepted the coffee without gratitude. The photographs arrived by messenger after 6. They showed the 6 surviving envelopes clearly enough to examine the cut edges. Each missing panel had a different width. Wolfe arranged them in 2 rows according to the direction of the wax keys, 4 left, 2 right. The 7th, according to Saul's photograph before it vanished, had carried a right-facing key, 4 left. 3 right, I said. "Not directions through a tunnel," Wolfe replied. "Instructions for reading." He placed the left-facing envelopes in reverse order and the right-facing envelopes in normal order. Then he compared the widths of the missing address panels with columns in the 1920 directory. Each matched a separate line length. Words were not removed, Wolfe said. Lines were. Kramer stood. What lines? The registered address was written across 7 envelope panels, 1 line on each. When cut away, The strips formed a complete address. The key seals indicated the order in which the strips should be read. Where are the strips? One is in Archie's possession. I took out the scrap bearing Wolfe's name. Kramer's glare could have heated Fritz's kitchen. You withheld that? It was safer than the hospital. Wolfe ignored us. He studied the ink under magnification. This text was added over earlier writing. He took a small pad of cotton, dampened it with a solution from his desk cabinet, and touched the edge of the scrap. The faded words, Nero Wolfe and West 35th Street, blurred slightly. Beneath them, another line appeared in brown-black ink. Rear entrance, Harrow Court. Kramer bent close. That is the registered address. 1/7 of it, Wolfe said. Then the missing envelope strip was altered to point to you. Precisely. Someone painted my address over Crane's original line and placed it where Vale would find it. Why? To persuade us that Wolfe had been chosen years earlier, I said. Wolfe nodded. A flattering absurdity intended to conceal a practical fact. The old address still exists beneath the forgery. Kramer reached for the telephone. I will have the other 6 panels examined. There are no panels, Wolfe reminded him. Only the envelopes from which they were cut. Then we find who cut them. That person may be dead. Harold Tim? Possibly Harold Crane. Kramer lowered the receiver. You are saying Crane divided the bank address into 7 parts, sealed each envelope with reading instructions, and gave them to his heirs. Not heirs, custodians. Why 7? Because no single person could open the box by betrayal. The key and all 7 address lines were required. I looked at the altered scrap. Someone gathered the envelopes, cut out the lines, and then lost or hid the strips. Or distributed them again, Wolfe said. Kramer asked, who has the physical key? Wolfe's eyes went to the dark red seal from the first envelope. The obvious answer is Owen Pike. Therefore I distrust it. The telephone rang. I answered. A man spoke rapidly. Mr. Goodwin, this is Arthur Bell, assistant manager of Hudson, Citibank. Someone has just attempted to enter private box 314. Who? He presented a key and identified himself as Harold Crane's legal representative. Did he know the registered address? He knew 6 lines of it. Covered the mouthpiece and told Wolfe. His eyes closed for 2 seconds, then opened. Ask which line he lacked. I did. Bell answered, the final line, the rear entrance designation. The scrap on Wolfe's desk read, Rear entrance, Harrow Court. Is the man still there? I asked. Yes. We delayed him under the pretense of verifying the old register. Description? Tall, heavy shoulders, dark hair. Owen Pike. Kramer was already on his feet. Wolfe lifted one hand. Ask Mr. Bell whether the applicant came alone, I asked. Bell lowered his voice. A woman is waiting outside the private box room. Brown hair, dark coat. She gave the name Clara Crane, the woman from the hospital. Kramer headed for the door with Stebbins behind him. Wolfe said, Inspector, do not arrest them before they attempt the box. Kramer stopped. Why not? Because opening it will reveal whether the key is genuine, and if it is, then we shall know who killed Harold Tim to obtain it. Kramer stared at him. You already know? I know that Mr. Pike has 6 lines of an address that were cut from 6 envelopes years ago. I know the 7th line was hidden beneath my name. I know someone sent us a false mask to make Hudson City Bank appear to be the final destination. What else is there? Wolfe leaned back. A locked box is rarely the end of a mystery. It is merely another envelope. Kramer left at a speed Wolfe would have condemned in the house. I reached for my hat. Wolfe said, You will accompany him. I assumed so. Observe the woman. Pike may possess the key, but she possesses the missing line. And the murderer? Wolfe's lips pushed forward. The murderer possesses something more valuable than either. What? The knowledge of what the box actually contains. I'll expand Chapter 7 into a full connected chapter of roughly 5,000 to 7,000 characters, continuing directly from the bank box discovery. Chapter 7. The man who knew too much, Hudson City Bank, produced a key, an empty box, and 4 angry men, which was not the order Inspector Kramer had expected. The key Owen Pike carried fitted box 314. The 7-line address, reconstructed from the 6 old strips and the altered scrap bearing Wolfe's name, satisfied the bank's private register. Arthur Bell turned both locks while Kramer, Stebbins, Pike, and I watched. Inside the box lay a layer of grey dust and a folded strip of green ribbon. At first glance, there were no inheritance records, no original will, no payment ledgers, and no statement from Matthew Mercer. It appeared that someone had opened the box before us and removed everything worth killing for. Pike stared into it. "That is impossible." Kramer gripped his shoulder. "You had the key." "I obtained it yesterday from Harold Tim. I found it in the cedar box after Tim was dead." "That puts you in the room with the body." Pike's expression hardened. "It puts me in the room after the murderer had gone." Kramer took him downtown. The woman calling herself Clara. Crane had disappeared from the bank vestibule before the box was opened. She had apparently recognized one of Kramer's men and decided that family loyalty had limits. The police searched the street, but New York swallowed her without chewing. I returned to the brownstone shortly after 7. Wolfe was in the dining room finishing a dish of veal kidneys with mushrooms. He considered reports delivered during dinner. An attack upon digestion, so I waited until he had eaten 2 slices of pear and transferred himself to the office. "The box was empty," I said. He settled behind his desk. "Not empty. It contained dust and ribbon. Therefore, it contained evidence." "The ribbon?" "Describe it." I did. "The cavity behind the loose brick at Mercer House contained an identical strip," Wolfe said. "Someone marked both hiding places. To show they were connected? Or to show that both had been emptied by the same person?" I sat at my desk. "Pike admits taking the key from Tim's room after the murder. Kramer has him. Mr. Pike admits entering a murder room because denial would fail. That does not make him the murderer. You have another candidate?" "I have several candidates and insufficient chairs." He closed his eyes. "The missing records were removed before Pike reached the bank," I said. "The person who took them knew the address and had either another key or access through the bank." "Indeed. Vale knew the bank procedure." "Too well. You think he emptied the box?" Wolfe opened his eyes. "I think Martin Vale has known too much from the beginning. He knew that the envelope appeared blank. He knew of the cedar box, the special lock, the bank's address requirement, and the division of the address across 7 envelopes. Yet, he repeatedly claimed ignorance of the record's location. He was Crane's helper. He was Mercer's bookkeeper. That made him useful to both sides and faithful to neither. Wolfe instructed me to telephone the hospital. Martin Vale was conscious and stable enough to receive a visitor the following afternoon. Wolfe then told me to locate Peter Crane, nephew of the dead lawyer. Peter Crane required less effort than expected. He had already telephoned twice while I was at the bank. He was 36, managed the remaining Crane properties, and lived in an apartment near Washington Square. When I reached him, he objected to appearing before Wolfe until I mentioned box 314. "What was in it?" he demanded. "Come tomorrow at 6 and hear the answer." "Who else will be there?" "That depends on who is alive and available." The messenger in the grey cap was harder. Fritz remembered his face. Samuel Pike, the Mercer House doorman, remembered seeing him near the building. A description circulated among newsstands and delivery offices produced a name by noon the next day. He was Leonard Briggs, an unemployed theatre porter who accepted cash errands from anyone carrying it. I found him in a pool room on 10th Avenue. When I told him Wolfe wished to see him, he dropped his cue. "I only delivered an envelope. That is why you are invited. Wolfe admires accuracy." "Will the police be there?" "Probably." He came. At 6 that evening, Wolfe's office contained Inspector Kramer, Sergeant Stebbins, Owen Pike under police supervision, Peter Crane, Leonard Briggs, and Martin Vale. The hospital had objected to Vale leaving, but Wolfe had obtained a physician, a private ambulance, and permission from the district attorney. Vale occupied the red leather chair with a blanket over his knees and a nurse behind him. Saul Panzer stood near the bookshelves. I sat at my desk. Wolfe surveyed the gathering. "Mr. Vale," he said, "you arranged the delivery of the unmarked envelope." Vale's pale face remained still. "Harold Tim arranged it. He prepared it. You delivered it through Mr. Briggs." Briggs shifted in his chair. Wolfe turned to him. "Who paid you?" The messenger looked at Kramer, then at Vale. "That man." Vale gripped the blanket. Briggs continued. "He gave me $20 Monday evening. He showed me Mr. Wolfe's house and told me to ask for Nero Wolfe directly. He said I must not write the address or leave a receipt." "You watched the house first?" "He wanted me to make sure Mr. Wolfe still lived there." Fritz had seen Briggs across the street. Kramer faced Vale. "You lied." Vale's voice was weak. "I was protecting Harold." "Harold Tim was already afraid of you," Wolfe said. "That is why he disguised the message. He knew you might intercept it." Vale shook his head. "I helped him." "You did, many years ago. You helped Harold Crane divide the registered address among the envelopes. You helped conceal Matthew Mercer's records in box 314. You knew the physical key was kept in the cedar box and that the blank paper would identify Hudson City Bank." Peter Crane leaned forward. "My uncle trusted Vale?" "Your uncle employed him secretly," Wolfe replied. "Mr. Vale had access to Mercer's accounts. He supplied evidence of payments made to Briarbank Hospital and helped Crane prove that Matthew Mercer had been confined under a false name." Vale whispered, "Then you know I tried to expose them." "You tried to profit from them." Vale looked up. Wolfe's tone remained level. "After Crane died, you and Tim became custodians. Tim retained the key. You retained the complete address in memory. Neither could reach the records alone. That arrangement held until Elias Mercer's health began failing and the old inheritance might be contested." Pike said, "Vale offered the records to me." Kramer turned. "When?" "3 weeks ago. He wanted $50,000. He claimed the records proved that part of the Mercer fortune belonged to another branch of the family." Peter Crane's face tightened. "Which branch?" "Not yours," Wolfe said. Peter stood. "That is a lie. Sit down." Peter did not obey until Stebbins placed a hand near his elbow. Wolfe continued. "Mr. Vale needed the key. He attempted to frighten Tim into surrendering it. Tim instead sent the blank envelope to me, hoping I would locate the bank and secure the records before Vale could act." Vale said, "Then why did I send the messenger?" "Because you discovered Tim's plan after the envelope had been prepared. You could not safely destroy it. Tim had told others that evidence would reach me if he were harmed. You therefore completed the delivery yourself. Why would I lead you to the box? To make me find it while concealing your involvement. You expected to observe my progress, obtain the address, recover the key from Tim, and reach the bank first. That is why you visited this office pretending to warn us. You needed to learn how much I had understood." Kramer said, "Then Vale killed Tim." "Not necessarily." Vale's eyes closed briefly. Wolfe turned toward Pike. "You followed Vale from this house to Riddle Street." Pike nodded. "I had watched him for 2 days. I knew he was trying to assemble Crane's papers." "You entered number 19 with Mr. Marsh and Mr. Baird and detained Vale." "I wanted the address. But you did not shoot him." Pike's gaze moved to Peter Crane. The room became quiet. Peter said, "I was never at Riddle Street." Wolfe picked up a photograph from Saul's packet. "This shows the writing desk immediately before the lights failed. Reflected in the glass of the bookcase is the lower half of a fourth man standing in the corridor." I carried the photograph to Peter. Only a trouser leg and a polished shoe were visible. The shoe had a narrow, pale stripe across the toe, where the leather had recently been repaired. Peter looked down involuntarily. His right shoe bore the same repair. Kramer rose. Peter remained seated. but his face had lost color. Wolfe said, "You entered through the connecting passage from number 17. You heard that the records might prove Matthew Mercer left a surviving child. If so, the Crane claim to the disputed inheritance would fail." "My family was robbed," Peter said. "Perhaps. But not in the manner you preferred. You cannot prove I fired. The bullet struck Vale high in the chest because you aimed in darkness at the shape beside the desk. You believed he held the missing envelope. After firing, you seized it and escaped through the old passage." Peter laughed once. It was not a pleasant sound. "Where is the gun?" "At your house, unless you have moved it." "Saul?" Saul spoke from the bookshelves. "A .32 automatic is taped behind the lower drawer of Mr. Crane's writing cabinet. The police officer outside his apartment has been instructed not to touch it until Inspector Kramer calls." Peter lunged from the chair. Stebbins caught one arm. Pike caught the other, perhaps from public spirit and perhaps because he enjoyed it. When Peter stopped struggling, Wolfe regarded him. "You killed Harold Tim," Wolfe said. "Then you followed the evidence to Riddle Street and shot Vale because he knew the records named the true heir. You feared he would sell that knowledge before you could destroy it." Peter stared at Vale. "He told me the fortune would go to a stranger." Vale's lips twisted. "I told you nothing. You listened outside the door." "That is enough," Kramer said. "It is not," Wolfe replied. Kramer scowled. "We have the shooter. You have one shooter. Harold Tim was killed before the events on Riddle Street. His murderer removed the records from box 314 and placed green ribbon in both empty hiding places." Everyone looked toward Vale. Vale's breathing quickened. Wolfe leaned back. Mr. Vale paid the messenger. Mr. Vale knew the bank. Mr. Vale knew the registered address. Mr. Vale had worked with Crane and Tim. Most important, Mr. Vale knew that. The visible compartment had already been emptied before it was opened. Vale whispered, "I never said that." "You did. At the hospital you said the woman wanted the envelope because it would lead to the records. You did not fear that Pike had already reached the box. You knew he had not, because you had emptied it yourself." Kramer stepped toward him. Vale looked around the office, searching for sympathy and finding none. "I did not kill Harold," he said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Then tell us who did." Vale lowered his head. After several seconds he spoke. Harold Crane's evidence did not name a distant heir. It named someone everyone already knew. "Who?" Peter demanded. Vale looked at Wolfe. "The answer is in the records," he said. "And the records are where no one will ever find them." Wolfe lifted his glass of beer. "You are mistaken, Mr. Vale. They were found this afternoon." Vale's head jerked up. For the first time since entering the office, his fear was greater than his pain. Wolfe drank, wiped his lips, and placed the glass on the desk. "Tomorrow evening," he said, "we shall conclude this matter. We shall identify Harold Tim's murderer, recover the stolen inheritance records, and name the person for whom the address was removed." Vale stared at him. The man who knew too much had finally learned one fact too many. Nero Wolfe had the evidence. Chapter 8. The Address That Was Absent at 9. The following evening, Wolfe's office was full again, though the seating arrangement had changed. Peter Crane occupied a straight-backed chair near Inspector Kramer, with Sergeant Stebbins standing behind him. Owen Pike sat by the bookshelves, no longer under arrest, but not yet trusted enough to be comfortable. Martin Vale had been returned to the hospital under guard. His physician had forbidden another trip to West 35th Street, so a sworn statement lay on Wolfe's desk in place of the man himself. Edwin Marsh had come because he represented the Crane estate. Samuel Pike, the doorman from Mercer House, sat beside him and looked as if he regretted every door he had ever opened. Leonard Briggs, the thin messenger in the grey cap, had been released after repeating his account to Kramer. The only person missing was the woman who had used the names Clara Tim, Clara Crane, and Clara Vale at different points in the investigation. Kramer's men had found her that afternoon in a furnished room near Columbus Circle. Her real name was Helen Baird. She was Leon Baird's sister and had once worked as Harold Crane's secretary. She had admitted cutting the electric wires at Riddle Street, but denied firing the shot. Her explanation was that she had been trying to create darkness long enough to recover the remaining evidence before Peter Crane could reach it. Wolfe had accepted the denial before Kramer did. Fritz brought beer for Wolfe, coffee for Kramer, and nothing for Peter Crane. That was not an official judgment. But Fritz possessed instincts. Wolfe looked around the office. "We began," he said, "with an envelope bearing no name, no street, and no written destination. Mr. Goodwin assumed it had been delivered by mistake. That assumption was natural and therefore inadequate. I let it pass. It was the final chapter, and generosity is cheaper near the end." The messenger, Wolfe continued, had been shown this house in advance. He had been instructed to ask specifically for Nero Wolfe and to refuse a receipt. The envelope required no address because its route did not depend upon writing. Its destination had been placed in a man's memory. Kramer frowned. "We know Vale hired the messenger." Indeed, Mr. Vale wished the envelope delivered, but he did not wish his participation discovered. He hoped I would solve Harold Tim's puzzle, identify the bank, and reveal the registered address. Then he intended to obtain the key and reach the box before anyone understood his interest. Peter Crane shifted in his chair. "You said the records were found." "They were." "Then, where are they?" Wolfe ignored him. "The blank sheet inside the envelope was not a letter," he said. "It was an instrument. Its folds supplied alignment. Its 3 pinholes supplied selection. Placed over the proper page of the old city directory, the holes identified the letters H, C, and B. "Hudson City Bank," Kramer said. "Yes. We first interpreted the letters as Harrow Children's Home, Crane Brothers, and Briarbank Hospital because those names occupied the marked positions. That interpretation was not entirely false. It led Archie to the history of Matthew Mercer's confinement. But Harold Tim intended a second reading. The initials named the institution in which Harold Crane had rented private box 314. Marsh adjusted his spectacles. "The number written on Mercer's check." "Placed there by Owen Pike," Wolfe said. "He wished us to know the box number. After he realized the blank sheet had reached this house." Pike nodded. "I could not open it without the address." "The bank required 2 things," Wolfe continued. "The physical key and the exact registered address. The wax impression. On the envelope represented the first. The missing address represented the second." Samuel Pike scratched his cheek. "Then why were all those envelopes at Riddle Street cut apart?" "Because someone feared the addresses, not the contents." Wolfe picked up one of the police photographs. It showed the cream-colored envelopes spread across Harold Crane's writing desk, each bearing a red key seal and a neat rectangular hole where an address had once appeared. Crane divided the registered address into 7 lines. He wrote 1 line on each envelope and gave the envelopes to separate custodians. No single person could identify the box's full registration. The seals indicated the order in which the removed strips were to be read. A left-facing key reversed a line. A right-facing key preserved it. Kramer said, "But somebody cut all 7 strips away." Mr. Vale did, years after Crane's death. He gathered the envelopes one by one under the pretense of settling Crane's private files. He removed the address lines and kept 6 of them. The 7th, the line reading "Rear Entrance, Harrow Court," remained hidden in the writing desk. "The scrap Archie found," Stebbins said. "Precisely. Mr. Vale later covered the original words with my name and address. He wanted us to believe that Harold Crane had selected me long ago. That fiction concealed the practical purpose of the strip." Peter looked from Wolfe to Kramer. "Vale was the thief. Arrest him." "Mr. Vale was a thief," Wolfe agreed. "He was also a blackmailer and an opportunist. But he did not shoot himself at Riddle Street, and he did not kill Harold Tim." Peter's hands tightened on his knees. Kramer said, "The gun in Crane's apartment fired the bullet that hit Vale." "Yes. That gives us Peter for the shooting. It gives you more than that." Wolfe lifted a second photograph. Saul had taken it in the vault of Hudson City Bank after the supposedly empty box had been opened. It showed the interior, the grey dust, and the strip of green ribbon. "The box appeared empty," I said, "because everyone assumed it's visible. Floor was its true floor. Kramer stared. A false bottom? Not an ordinary one. Harold Crane collected mechanical locks. Box 314 contained a concealed inner compartment released by pressure on 2 points beneath the rear hinge. The green ribbon marked those points. A second strip had been left in the cavity at Mercer House to indicate the same mechanism. Pike leaned forward. I saw no hinge release. You were looking for papers, not workmanship. And Vale knew? I asked. He knew there was a second compartment, but not how to open it. Harold Tim had never trusted him with the mechanism. Wolfe looked toward Kramer. Inspector, you may produce the documents. Kramer disliked being directed in public, but he had waited for the moment. He opened a leather case and removed 3 bundles tied with faded cord. Peter Crane's face changed. The first bundle contained the original will of Josiah Mercer. The second held Briarbank Hospital registers and receipts showing payments made to confine Matthew Mercer under the false name Matthew Harrow. The third contained letters, affidavits, and a birth certificate. Marsh reached for the certificate. Kramer kept it out of reach. Wolfe said, Matthew Mercer did not die without an heir. His daughter survived. Her descendants possess a valid claim to the portion of the estate diverted to Elias Mercer's branch. Peter rose. Stebbins placed both hands on his shoulders and returned him to the chair. My uncle represented the Crane family, Peter said. Those papers belong to us. Your uncle represented justice badly but persistently, Wolfe replied. The Crane family had no claim to the inheritance. Harold Crane concealed the documents because he feared Elias Mercer would destroy them. You discovered the truth by listening outside Martin Vale's room at number 17 Riddle Street. Peter's mouth twisted. Vale said the estate would go to strangers. It would go to its lawful owners. My family maintained those properties for 40 years. That is not a principle of inheritance. It is an excuse for appetite. Kramer said, Tell him about Tim. Wolfe poured beer and waited for the foam to settle. Harold Tim arranged the blank message after learning that Mr. Vale intended to sell the records. He removed the key from its ordinary hiding place and placed it in the cedar box at Mercer House. He then telephoned Peter Crane. Peter looked at Kramer. I never spoke to Tim. Your telephone records disagree, Wolfe said. Tim believed that as Harold Crane's nephew, you would help protect the papers. He told you the evidence would destroy the Crane family's hope of recovering any part of the Mercer fortune. He was confused. He was cautious. You were... Not, Wolfe set down the glass. You went to Mercer House before Owen Pike arrived. Samuel Pike admitted giving you access to 3C because you carried an old authorization bearing your uncle's signature. Tim showed you the cedar box and explained that the records belonged to Matthew Mercer's descendants. Samuel Pike lowered his head. Peter said, Tim was alive when I left. That is false. You struck him with the brass fireplace tool after he refused to surrender the key. You searched the box, found it empty, and assumed he had already sent the key elsewhere. When Owen Pike entered later, he discovered the key beneath the lining where Tim had concealed it. Pike nodded slowly. There was a slit in the velvet. You removed it and concealed your presence from the police. I had reasons. You usually do. Peter looked at the bundles on Kramer's lap. You cannot prove I struck Tim. The fireplace tool carried no fingerprints because you wiped it, but one thread remained caught beneath the brass collar. It came from the lining of your right coat pocket. The police recovered the coat this afternoon, Kramer added. The laboratory matched it. Peter's eyes went to the door. Saul stood there. Wolfe continued. After killing Tim and failing to recover the records, you followed the trail to Riddle Street. You entered through the old passage connecting number 17 with number 19, hoping to intercept Vale and recover whatever evidence he had taken there. You overheard Vale explaining that the inheritance belonged outside both the Mercer and Crane branches. When the lights failed, you fired at Vale and took the 7th envelope from the desk. Helen Baird cut the lights, Kramer said. She admits Peter paid her. Peter turned toward Marsh. You are my attorney. Marsh removed his spectacles. Not in a murder case. Peter's laugh was quiet and empty. You are all accepting the word of a wounded thief. We are accepting physical evidence, Wolfe said. The pistol found in your apartment fired the bullet removed from the window frame. The coat fiber connects you to the weapon used on Tim. Saul's photograph places you at Riddle Street. The altered envelope strip was found in your desk after you fled. Most damaging, the documents you attempted to steal provide the motive for both attacks. Peter looked at the police, at the doors, and finally at Wolfe. My uncle spent his life on that case. Then you dishonored his labor. He left me debts and ruined houses. He left you the opportunity to act decently. You declined. Peter rose again, but this time he did not resist when Stebbins took his arm. Kramer told Samuel Pike and Owen Pike to remain available. Then he led Peter from the office. The others followed more slowly. Marsh paused at Wolfe's desk. Who are Matthew Mercer's descendants? That is now a matter for the court. You know, certainly. Wolfe's tone ended the discussion. When the door had closed behind the last visitor, Fritz entered to collect the cups. Wolfe leaned back, closed his eyes, and placed his hands on the arms of his chair. I sat at my desk and looked at the original envelope. It still bore no name and no street. After murder, fraud, false keys, cut addresses, and a bank box with 2 floors, it appeared almost modest. The absent address concealed the bank, I said. The blank paper identified it. The A seal stood for the key. The deleted panels supplied the registered phrase. Wolfe grunted. And Peter erased everything he could because the papers proved he had no right to the fortune. Another grunt. I suppose the lesson is that a blank envelope can say more than a written one. Wolfe opened one eye. The envelope was not blank. You merely lacked the information required to read it. I was saving that for my report. You may improve your report by omitting your errors. That would reduce it to 4 pages. Fritz left with the tray. The brownstone settled into its evening quiet. Beyond the windows, tires whispered over wet pavement, and a taxi horn objected to something on 10th Avenue. Upstairs, the orchids rested under Theodore's care, undisturbed by stolen inheritances or dead lawyers. Wolfe closed his eye again. The cleverest address, Archie, is sometimes the one a guilty man is desperate to erase. I looked at the unmarked envelope once more. It had reached the right house, named the right bank, exposed 2 thieves, and delivered a murderer to Kramer without carrying a single written word. For a letter with nothing on it, it had been extremely talkative.